Have you ever thought what it would be like to be part of Jesus' family? Um, we, we, we don't know a whole lot, but we do know one thing for certain. His brothers, at the beginning, hated him. At the very least, they denied him his godship. And families are like that. And there's something within families that sets the tone, one relationship within families that sets the tone for all of the other relationships. And it's what we started talking about a couple of weeks ago, and hopefully I will finish up in our Family Matters mini-series, Marriage, today. Now, I know last week I said that I was going to get into what a woman's responsibility is within a marriage, but before I get there was something that I did not highlight last week that I want to talk about. The first thing I want to remind everybody as we get into this is that when I am talking to the men, I don't want to hear any amens from the women. When I'm talking to the women, I don't want to hear any amens from the men, because you're all guilty. You can say amen to that. So let's do a little bit of review very quickly. Biblical responsibility of the husband. First and foremost, love sacrificially. Love sacrificially. We talked a little bit about this, and I use this illustration because it really nails it on the head. Most men will say, I will take a bullet for my wife. They will sacrifice their life. If there is a gunman and they are pointing the gun at their wife, the man would be happy to step in front and take the bullet. But are they willing to sacrifice their pride? Are you willing, when your wife doesn't feel well, to do the dishes, even though you spent all day at work? Are you willing to take the kids just spontaneously, just because you see that your wife it seems overwhelmed, you're willing to just take the kids out of the house and go do something? We'll take a bullet, but we're not going to spend time with the kids. Are we willing to say, I'm not going golfing, I'm not going hunting, I'm not going hanging out with my friends because my wife needs something? Even I'm not willing to go to work. That's sacrificial love. But not only that, there is a spiritual aspect of leadership that we have to live up to. We need to lead spiritually. Too many men leading a family are a thermostat instead of a thermometer. They are the thermostat instead of the thermometer. We have to be willing to overcome our inclination into dictating what needs to be done. We need to set what needs to be done. We have to be the leaders of the family. And there's a really specific reason for that, because the leader is also the one who is designed to provide and protect consistently. I use this illustration of the umbrella. Listen, as leaders of the family, we are not going to be able to stop every attack that comes with our family, but we can be an umbrella that protects them from the rain, from those attacks. We as men have to do these things. And something I didn't get to last week that I want to talk about right now very quickly before we get into the women And that is this. 1 Peter 3:7 says this. In the same way, you husbands must give honor to your wives. Treat your wife with understanding as you live together. She may be the weaker, and the weaker vessel is the term there, but she may be weaker than you are, but she is your equal partner in God's gift in new light. Treat her as you should, so your prayers will be answered or will not be hindered. There's a whole lot in this. I could probably teach a series just on this text right here, but I want to highlight two things. First, I want to talk about the weaker vessel. She may be weaker than you. There's a whole lot of people who want to insert their own idea of what weaker means. Okay? It's very important that you understand weaker is simply in regards to physical strength and social status within first century Judaism. Women in those times were treated more like property. And so they didn't have the ability that the men had within the social sphere. And so that's what is kind of meant by weaker. It wasn't that they were inferior in any way. It was that they just didn't have what the men had. Had nothing to do with their spiritual aspects, had nothing to do with their intellect, had nothing to do with even the potential that is within them. So I want to address that, but it's interesting. The first thing he says is that husbands must give honor to your wives. That word must give, that word give also means to pay. To pay honor to your wife. It's interesting that we sometimes misunderstand the idea of honor. Okay? Honor is not something that we determine. It is something that we recognize. Your wife's honor is not tied up in what you think about her. Your wife's honor is tied up in what God thinks about her. What you are to do in giving her honor is to recognize the value. When something is valuable, guess what? You're willing to pay for it. And the more value it is, the more you're willing to pay for. There's a story I read on Facebook, and I don't have all of the details, but I remember this story, and a father had a daughter, and he gave her a car that had been in the garage, and had been sitting in the garage for probably 20 years. And he told her, this is your car, you can do whatever you want with it, but talk to me before you make any definite decisions. And so she says, okay, so she hops in, and it's covered in dust. It doesn't look very good. The seats on the inside, I mean, it just didn't look great. But she hopped in there, they worked on it a little bit, finally got it started, and she drove it down to the dealership, and she was going to trade it in for a new car. And so she talked to the guy at the store, and he says, listen, I'll give you $1,000 toward a trade-in for this car. And she says, well, that's better than what I thought I was going to get, because this car doesn't look very great. So she calls her dad up, and she says, hey, Dad, I'm here, and the guy says he'll give me $1,000. He says, well, before you do that, I'm going to give you an address, and I want you to take the car over to this address. So he gives her the address. She hops in the car. She drives it over to this address, and it is a antique car dealership. And she walks in there, and she says, I have this car, and they were going to give me $1,000 for it, and I just was wondering what you could do for me. The guy stands up from the desk, takes a step toward the car, sees the car, and without even going outside, He says, just based on what I see right here, I'll give you $1 million for that car. Worth, there's an intrinsic worth to certain things because of their, get this, because of their uniqueness. Husbands, your wife was created by God in a unique way. There is intrinsic worth and value to your wife. And if you want to be the person that God wants you to be in this relationship, and you want out of this relationship the best that you could get out of this relationship, it would be worthwhile for you to pay honor to your spouse. Now, understand this, that sometimes we like to compare. And we do it in relationships all the time. And unfortunately, a lot of times it gets put into the marriage relationship, and we often compare. And the problem with that is that when you compare within a marriage, you are comparing apples and oranges. Listen to this. Men are called to be the head of the family. But God designed women to be the heart of the family. Why would we compare our heart to our head? Think of it this way. My wife, and I do this too sometimes, but I think my wife does it more than I do, we'll buy things from Amazon. And we get free shipping. So we think we're saving a bunch of money if we just buy from Amazon. We're not going to go into that. To say this, sometimes you think something, you know something's coming, and you get a package. You don't know what's inside the package per se, but you know you bought something, and you know that it could be very, very fragile. And so you pick it up, and you're very careful with it. Now, sometimes I buy things, that I know is like maybe a wrench, and it's in this box. And I know it's a wrench. You know what I do? I pick it up and I throw it over there because it's not going to do it. It's not fragile at all. But when something you know is or might be fragile, you take very, very good care of it because you don't want to break it. And that is how we have to, as husbands, go to our wives. It's interesting, the phrase, to break someone's heart is so common. Now, you have probably heard this next phrase I'm about to say, but it's not very common. Have you ever heard somebody's, that broke my brain? It didn't really break your brain. It was just hard to understand. But a broken heart is a real thing. And we have to understand, men, that it is easy to take something fragile and break it. I remember reading on Facebook, a guy says, my wife is fragile, and I need to treat her as though she is fragile. Not fragile like a flower, fragile like a bomb. That's really funny. But think of this. That is a perspective that will ruin a family. Because you treat fragile like a flower differently than you treat fragile like a bomb. And it all comes by motivation. You treat the fragile like a flower because you don't want to destroy it, because it's valuable to you. You treat fragile like a bomb because you don't want to get blown up. It's not that this thing is valuable that valuable to you. It's not that you're just scared that something's going to happen and it's going to blow up in your face. how you perceive your spouse is going to determine how you react. And so it's very important that when we look at this, that we look at it from the right perspective. Our wives are fragile, not like a bomb, but precious. You know what? This bomb, if it doesn't go off, I don't care about it at all. If I know it's not going to go off, I'll use it like a baseball. It's a different perspective when you have something like a flower that you cherish. So how do we treat our wives with honor? What is it? What are some things that we can do specifically to show honor to our wives? One is always speak kindly to her and about her. Always speak kindly to her and about her. Show interest in the things she's interested in. One of the things that I had to learn to do, because I'm a very inside person. Okay? Honestly, if it wasn't for Jesus grabbing a hold of my life, I could care less about any of you. You know what? Something's going on in your life, my thought would have been, well, I'm glad it wasn't me. When you get married, you have to learn, if that's how you are and you want a good relationship, you have to get over that. And so I started asking, not just asking, but I started showing interest when Jeanette came home. Hey, how was your day? Now, showing interest and asking a question, two different things. Don't ask a question and then be on your phone. Don't ask a question and then dismiss everything she has to say. I read somewhere that if you want to show interest in somebody or something, you will ask questions. Treat her as a partner, not a servant. Don't compare her to others. Highlight her special days. We all know what special days those are. And here's two of them that I think we sometimes overlook. One, give her immediate access to you. Give her immediate. This is going to be profound in showing her honor, because what you're doing is you're showing her that she is important to you over whatever she's doing right now. Now, I know that there are times where that is just not, you can't do that. Okay, I get that there, but those times should be so minute and so far apart that it's not an issue. One of the things that my wife, and I'm thankful for this, that she does is that when I'm out golfing, she does everything in her power not to call me, because she knows that I don't like getting distracted. Usually because I'm with somebody, and it's really rude to be out on the golf course playing golf and talking on the phone while other people are having to wait for you. It's just kind of rude. And so she doesn't call me very often when I'm on the golf course. But when she does, you better believe I answer it, because I know, and if I don't, I usually call her right back, because I know it's important. Give her immediate access to you. Are showing her that she is important to you when you do that. And here's another one. Be accountable to her with your schedule. Schedule the things you plan. Be accountable to her. It's not that you have to get her permission about everything. But one of the things that I hate is when somebody asks me a question that I should know the answer to, but I don't know the answer to it because somebody else was supposed to tell me and hasn't told me. And so as the leader, they come up to me and they say, "Hey, when's this supposed to start?" I should know that answer. But I have to tell that person, I don't know, even though that I'm the one in charge. How much worse is that for your spouse to not know what's going on in your life? Husbands, we have a responsibility to honor our wives, and I think if we did what we were supposed to do to honor our wives, you would find that it would be easy for them to do what they're supposed to do toward us. I say that. Wives, your turn. Ephesians 5:33. So again I say, each man must love his wife as he loves himself. Before I get to the next part, I want to say something real quick. You know what I have found, and I brought this up yesterday, and my wife, I asked my wife this question, and she answered it just like this. And probably most women will be able to answer this fairly quickly. Men, you might not be able to answer this. You read in several locations that it tells the men to love your wife as what? You love yourself. You know what it doesn't say to wives? It doesn't say, love your husbands as you love yourself. And I have a theory why. You want to hear it? It goes along this line, and I've made this statement before, but it's so true. On average, most of the time, women think they look worse than they actually do. That's why they spend time in the mirror. On average, men think they look better than they actually do. Listen, I can't tell you how many times I got on the scale this morning. I realized I need to, believe it or not, I need to lose at least 25 pounds. Okay, I need it. But you know what goes through the back of my head? I still look okay. My wife would never, that thought would never go through her mind. And that's how women are. Part of the reason that God told men to love your wives as you love yourself is, and didn't tell that to women, is because a lot of times women are disappointed in themselves. Men are not. In fact, research has shown over the last 20 years that men are twice as likely to be content and happy with who they are than women are. Men like to love themselves, like to think highly of themselves. It's actually built into our DNA, how God designed us. And that is why God told men to love your wives as yourself. Women, he says this to you, second half of verse 33, and the wife must respect her husband. Respect have a certain power to it. And it's interesting that it did not say, and wives, respect your husband unless. We like to throw that unless part in there. Well, Pastor Steve, what if my husband's not a Christian? I don't see that in fact, you will find as we get further in here, he addresses that specifically later on when we get to that point. Respect is very A very interesting thing. And here's how the best way to look at respect. Respect should be freely given, never expected. It should be freely given, never expected. So you should be willing to respect everybody from the time you meet them. But you should also expect to have to earn everybody's respect. If we had that idea and we lived by that idea, our life would be so much easier. But you know what we want to do instead? We want to demand respect from other people, but make other people earn our respect. That's society telling you right there. And guess what? It's just the opposite of what the Bible tells you to do. Wife must respect her husband. There's a power in respect. Listen to this, women. And this is, go ahead and throw that up there. When a wife shows respect to her husband, it strengthens his God-ordained leadership and confidence. His leadership and confidence is God-ordained. And when you show respect, you strengthen that within him. I want think of it like this. I've said this. I've talked about Eli being in basketball, and I was a basketball coach for several years, and there's just something about positive reinforcement that just goes a long way. If you're a coach and you're sitting on the sidelines and your team is playing and you're yelling a bunch of negative things at your team, what are they going to do? What is that going to instill in them? I will tell you what, because I was there. I was on a team, and I wasn't very good at the time because I was pretty young. And we played, and the coach, not only in the game but also in practice, was always seeming to criticize and yell at us about not doing it right. Every once in a while, but very rarely, every once in a while, he would tell us, hey, that was a good job. You did that. You did really good. I see some improvement in you. You know what almost everybody on the team did? They stopped trying. Because all it led to was criticism. That is just the opposite of respect. Proverbs 14:1 says this: a woman builds her home, but a foolish woman tears it down with her hands. And I will throw in there, or with her voice. We're going to get to that in a little bit later, the whole voice thing. So how do you women respect your husband? First and foremost, I want you to understand that you have to accept the fact that you married an imperfect man. Accept that fact, and I think you all do. But to go along with that, you don't need to remind him of that every time you get a chance. Husbands or wives, focus instead on what your husband does well. If you have two groups of people, or one group of people, and you separate two conversations you have with them. First conversation with this group of people, you say, what I want you to do is I want you to think of 25 things. Well, let's do this. I want you to think of 100 things that you don't like. And chances are, within 5 minutes, doesn't matter how big a group. That could be 2 people. Within 5 minutes, chances are they'll have a list of 100 things they don't like. You take that same group of people, you wait a couple of weeks, and you go in and you say, I want you to come up with 20 things that are positive about your spouse. You know what? It would take them hours to figure that out. And you know why it is? Because of what they think about. You think about all the bad things, all the negative things about your husband, guess what? That's all you're going to see. Focus on what your husband does well, and the things that he doesn't do well, it's going to revolutionize you. He'll want to make better. I know this. You know how I know? Because I'm a husband. When you don't agree with something, this is another really revolutionized idea that will help you so much, women. Trust me. When you have a conflict, a disagreement, when you don't agree on something, don't tell him he's wrong, but ask questions. And if it involves something biblically, ask questions to show him biblical instruction. Now, men can learn from that too. Don't just immediately think or tell that your wife that they're wrong, even if they are wrong. But ask questions. I say this all the time. Jesus was a master at asking questions. He was always right. And yet he didn't, and he very well could have, well, I'm right and you're wrong, and because I'm God and you're not. But why didn't he do that? Because he wanted his opponents, he wanted them to see the truth. I think sometimes in marriage, we don't want our spouses to see the truth. We just want to be right. Now, this next one is really pointed toward women again, but I think men can learn from this. You need to understand and use appropriately the 3 T's, the 3 T's of communication. Text, time, and tone. Text, time, and tone. Text. What you say, what words you use are very important. Time. When you use those words are very important. Tone. And this is a big one, women. How you say something is very important. Respect is one of those things that part of the reason that God is telling women to show respect to their husband is because he knows how men respond. Respect is one thing. There's another thing that the Bible talks about for women that they should do. Ephesians 5:22. For wives, this means submit to your husbands as to the Lord. In Colossians 3:18, wives, submit to your husbands as it is fitting for those who belong to the Lord. Pretty much, if you love Jesus, you need to submit to your husband. Again, there's no qualifier there. There's no qualifier unless. I will say this. Submission does not mean blind obedience. Even Jesus, even God himself has never said, I want you to blindly obey. Now, he does expect us to have faith, and sometimes having faith requires us not to have all the answers. Sometimes it requires us to take a step off of a cliff and not knowing what's going to happen. We women, submission, listen, here it's not like this. Biblical submission is a response to biblical headship. Biblical submission the way the Bible tells you to, is your response to biblical headship, which is, we discovered last week that men were created to be the head of the family. That's biblical headship. Biblical submission is a response to that. And yet we don't want, I'm not submitting to him. He's not a godly person. Do you submit to America's laws? As far as I know, most of our lawmakers are not Christian either. God has a lot to say about this. In fact, if you read 1 Peter chapter 2, I'm going to not read this whole thing, but 1 Peter chapter 2, verses 13 through 3 verses 4 has a lot to say about submission. For the Lord's sake, submit to all human authority, whether the king is head of the state or the officials he has appointed. Peter is telling the people to submit to the king. Guess who the king was? Guess what the king was not? Not a Christian. In fact, it was a persecutor of Christians. And yet, a little bit further, it says, respect, Peter's saying this to everybody, respect everyone and love the family of believers. He says in a little later that, respect the king. Slaves must submit to your masters with all respect. And then he talks about Jesus. He says this, he is your example, and you must follow in his steps. He never sinned. He never deceived anyone. He did not retaliate when he was insulted, nor threatened revenge when he suffered. He left his case in the hands of God, who always judges fairly. You know what? Too many spouses, and I'll include both men and women in this, too many spouses want to be the judge and jury of their spouse's behavior. He personally carried our sins in his body on the cross so that we could be dead to sin and live for what is right. By his wounds you are healed. Once you were like sheep who wandered away, but now you have turned to your shepherd, the guardian of my soul. And then he says this, in the same way. So he just got talking about all of the stuff that we just mentioned, and he says, in the same way, you wives must accept the authority of your husbands. Then, even if some refuse to obey the good news, in other words, even if some of them aren't Christians, even if some of them are Christians and they're just kind of veering off, even if they refuse to obey the good, your godly lives will speak to them without any words. They will be won over by observing your pure and reverent lives. Wives, if you're nagging your husband, especially if they're not Christian, how do you expect how do you even think that they're going to want to have anything to do with what you have? They're not. You're a Christian, and this is how you act? Well, I don't want to be a Christian. And then he says this, don't be concerned about the outward beauty or fancy hairstyles, expensive jewelry, or beautiful clothes. I'm going to be honest with you. I am always honest with you. And so when I say that, I don't really... I am thankful. I am extremely thankful that my wife is willing to get up every morning at 6:30 and exercise to stay healthy. I am very thankful that she is picky about the clothes that she wears. I am very thankful that she does her hair, and she puts on smell good stuff, but my nose is half broken, and so I have to be right next to her for the first 20 minutes it's on, or I won't smell it at all. But how important are all of those things? Here's what he said. You should clothe yourself instead with the beauty that comes from within. The unfolding beauty. Listen, women, because this is so important in your relationship with your spouse. The unfading beauty of gentle and quiet spirit, which is so precious to God. Why is that so important? Why is that so important? Because there is something built in every man. Okay? And it is the fight or flight. Have you ever heard of that? When put into an extreme situation, under a lot of pressure, when there is danger, there is instinct that comes within a man specifically, and they respond in one of two major ways. They flight, they run away, or they fight back. And why is this important? Because when women engage with their spouses, usually there is a strong emotion behind that engagement for the woman. Usually it's not for the man. Usually for the man it's very logical. For the women, not so much. There's usually strong emotion coming in from that. And as I've read a little bit of this before, but as I was doing this study, there was just this eye-opening thing to me. Women, when you are bringing emotion into a conflict, okay, men don't do well fighting emotion. Here's why. Because men don't fight emotionally, they fight intellectually. And listen, intellect will never beat emotion, because motion is not logical. It is not built on rationale. And so, if a man sees this emotion, he doesn't know how to deal with it. What do? Now he feels attacked because you're coming at him with these emotions. He feels attacked. There is fear. Why is there fear? Because you're going to beat him up? No. Because he has this relationship, this precious relationship that he wants, and now he has this feeling like, I don't know what to do, and this fear of losing it. So what does he do? What did we say the two main ways that men deal with this? Fight or flight. They can fight back, but they're not going to fight back with emotion. They might get there, They're going to fight back with the logic, intellect, and guess what? Chances are they're not going to win because people who are high on emotion usually don't think very clearly. So what's the other option? Flight. They don't run away, they run inside. They shut down. They'll shut down emotionally with what little emotion they have. They'll shut down relationally. A gentle and quiet spirit, precious in God's sight. And the reason why he wants you to do that is because he understands something. Let me ask you this question. Women, when there is an issue, there's a conflict, there's something that needs to be shared, do you respond emotionally or do you share your emotions? The difference is life-changing. Nobody is telling you, women, to hide your emotion, to not share your emotion. Nobody, that is the worst thing you need to do because that's going to bring resentment and all kinds of other problems. Nobody's telling you not to share your emotion, but that's not what happens a lot of times. A lot of times what happens is that they respond emotionally and men hit the fight or flight, and neither one of those gives you the outcome that you want. When men are attacked emotionally or feel attacked emotionally, it never ends well for either party. And that's why a gentle spirit goes a long way in a marriage relationship for the woman. Now, I'll tell you this. It's not easy. Most of the time, it's not easy for men to deal with their emotions and control their emotions. How much more with an individual who is built about emotion? But God has a plan, and that is He is not asking you to do anything that He is not going to equip you to do. Proverbs 31, 25 and 26 says this. Anybody who knows, women, you probably all know about Proverbs 31, right? I want to say this about Proverbs 31. It contradicts the idea that women are supposed to be barefoot and pregnant in the kitchen. If you don't believe me, read it. You'll find out why. It says this, verse 25. She is clothed with strength and dignity. She laughs without fear of the future. I love that. In fact, it's not that she's just not afraid of the future. She laughs without fear. When she speaks, her words are wise, and she gives instructions with kindness. Women, wives, the last time you had a confrontation with your husband, if you had to tell something to your husband, something that maybe he didn't want to necessarily hear, when you did that, did you instruct him with kindness? First Peter 3:1. In the same way, you wives must accept the authority of your husband. Again, no qualifier there. Then, even if some refuse to obey the good news, your godly lives will speak to them about without any words. they will be won over. Your your submission to your spouse speaks volumes about your submission to Jesus. My wife, my wife has a very sensitive nose. In fact, I will be outside and I will come inside from being outside. I don't have to be outside for very long. And if I get too close to her, she will say this to me. She knows what I'm about to say because she said it several times. You smell like outside. What? I smell like grass? I smell like the trees? I don't even know what smelling like outside smells like. But because she has a sensitive nose, she buys and she keeps these little plug-ins in our house, and it makes our house. Even though my nose isn't very, I could tell when I walk around that area. It just makes everything smell good. And you know what you do when you're smelling something that's good? You relax. Have you ever walked into a restaurant and here's a perfect one. Has anybody ever burnt popcorn? What do? Oh, that stinks. Get that away from me. But, I cook the turkey for Thanksgiving every year. But you walk into a house and the turkey's almost ready and it's been cooking most of the morning. You walk, that smells so good. Wives, you are like a smell. You're either going to be a fragrant smell that is pleasing and relaxes them, or you're going to be like burnt popcorn and they're going to do everything in their power to get away from you. We talked a little bit last week and the week before about Genesis chapter 2, verse 18, where it says that God created woman as a helper. And I don't want to get into all of that idea, but to say this. She brings something that he is missing. How many people like to put puzzles together? How many like it when there's one missing? You know what you don't realize? You don't realize that one is missing until when? Until you're done with it. Or almost completely done with it. You don't realize there's something. Now, can you have fun putting a puzzle together even though there is one missing? Yes, you can, because you don't know one's missing. Well, she doesn't like puzzles, so she doesn't. Eli loves Legos. I love Legos too. You know what? Is it not frustrating when you can't find a piece? Wives are that piece that fits a specific part of his life as a husband. You fit a specific part in his life. Unfortunately, too many people want to try and fit into this other part. And here's the problem. There's no open space over here. All the pieces are already intact right here. There's no place for you to fit. And so what do? Instead of going over here where they fit, they just sit on top of the rest of it. And the men are going like, what are you doing there? You ruined the whole picture that's over here. Everything else is green and you're red. As then let me ask you a question, men, real quick. Husbands, let me ask you a question. I spoke quite a bit yesterday or last week. Um, I want you to think in your mind real quick. Did you, did you do anything different this week after hearing what I said last week? I'm going to assume that you're not perfect and that there was room to grow in your relationship with your wife. Did you do anything different? I'm calling you out. And if you didn't, why? Is your relationship with your wife not that important to you? I'll show you. I'll show you what I did. I'll tell you what I did. Um, this past weekend, um, we went to a conference. Some of the leadership of the church went to a conference, and it was cold out. And so I determined the whole weekend that every time we got out of the car to go inside, I was going to go and pull in front of whatever building it was we were going to and drop her off at the door, that I was going to go park and then walk inside. And then when it was time to go, I went out to the car early, and she would let me know when she's getting ready to go. And I got in the car, and I drove it over to the front and picked her up. And Eric and Pastor Stephen really appreciated that too, because they were riding with us. It's a matter of what's important to you. If you're not going to change, don't expect a change. Women, how come he's so withdrawn? How come he won't talk to me? Maybe it's because you're hard to talk to. Maybe because every time you come to him, you're coming with an emotional agenda. And maybe your relationship with your spouse, and this is for everybody, maybe your relationship with your spouse, you don't have any major issues. There's nothing that is going to ruin your relationship. And maybe you say, I have a great relationship. Well, let me ask you this question. Do you strive to do as much for your spouse, man or woman? Do you strive to do as much for your spouse as Jesus did for you? Because if you don't, you're not doing enough. Here's what I want to challenge you guys with as I close. This next week, and I was going to do it last week, but I wanted to wait to this week because this gave everybody the opportunity, men and women. I want you to make a decision of something you're going to change as an individual. It doesn't matter about your spouse. It doesn't matter what they do, anything else. I want you to, whether it's the Holy Spirit convicting you about something specific, which I think he's doing to quite a few people, or is just something you had thought of in the past and now you know you need to make this change. I want you to work on this change between now and next week. Not only that, now I'm going to put the grind on here. Not only that, I want you to get a piece of paper. And I want you, at the end of next week, before we come to church next week, I want you to write it down and bring it with you. Now it's getting real, isn't it? Now I have to actually think about it. I actually have to do it, and then I have to write it down, and I have to bring it. I'm still debating on whether I want to read them out loud or not. You know what the definition of insanity is, right? Doing the same thing over and again, and expecting a different result. And yet, that's how a lot of people treat their marriage. Heavenly Father, we love you and we thank you for your mercies are new every morning. That no matter how much we screw up, you choose to forgive us. And we screw up a lot, God. Not just with our relationship with you, but our relationship with our spouses. But God, help us see with your eyes. See with your eyes what our marriage should look like, what our relationship would look like, how we should be treating each other. Lord, and help us grow in that. We thank you that you have given us this covenant that we get to share with our spouse. But Lord, this is just the beginning of a much better relationship that we're going to experience because of you. Now we ask that you go with us. Don't just change our mind, Lord, but help us change our actions. We ask this in your name. Amen. Amen. Hey, love you guys. Be blessed. Quick reminder, next week, right after service, we have a potluck and then a business meeting.